suggestions on giving English presentations. All right. Who was here last week? Okay. Very good. Thank you for coming back. Yes. Okay. Before we start, or have we begun? Oh yeah. We're rolling. Okay. So I want to thank you all very much for coming again on a Saturday, coming in person or viewing online for our second session on how to give English presentations. Now, last week we had a little technical difficulty, but as you can see, today we have a large screen which works. And this is good because large screens allow us to project and the effect is better. In a few weeks I will talk about making visual aids, and that's different depending on your presentation. But I want to review very quickly what we talked about last week. And hopefully in this process you will see the nice effects on the slides on a big screen. And if you know the answer, if you want to offer a response, those of you who were here last week, I would like some responses from you. So when we talk about giving English presentations, the first thing that we think about should be what is public speaking. We talked about public speaking as a form of communication. You have to communicate, deliver your message to your audience. That is the most important thing. Above everything else, above your skills as a presenter, above the technology, the most important thing is your message and how well you can communicate it. Okay? If you cannot communicate the message for whatever reason, sometimes it's not the presenter's problem, sometimes it's the audience, certain members of the audience. Maybe they have something on their mind. Maybe there's a problem with language. Whatever reason, the important thing is to communicate, and that is public speaking. We talked about how public speaking is difficult for a lot of people because you are in a position of being judged. You have to hold and maintain attention, the attention of your audience. You need to keep them engaged. And so that can be a stressful and sometimes impossible challenge. So that is the basic thing. Public speaking is broadly defined. It's defined in broad terms. As long as you are talking in public, and it can be to 2 people, to 3 people, to 100 people, online, it doesn't matter. Public speaking is defined very broadly. And so once we know these issues, we talked about difficulties in communication, language, we should ask ourselves how we can improve. And the best advice that I can give is to know yourself as a speaker first. Know yourself as a speaker first before you can know, before seeking to know what you can improve on. Okay? So know yourself first, and in time, know the specifics of the talk. Okay? So let's move on. Last time we also talked about finding someone that you admire as a public speaker to model yourself after. Okay? None of us can be public speakers that are perfect for everything. Right? It's a little bit like saying, I want to be an artist, right? Or I want to be a business person. You need to have some specific models. Okay? They don't have to be famous people, not necessarily. You can model your style, your content, but above everything else, find someone you admire. Okay, and then that's who I want to be. Okay, so I have modeled myself after speakers that I admire and professors that have taught me. I have copied their style in some ways. And it's a very good way to start practicing by modeling yourself after someone. That's a good way to start. Okay? It's something that it's not done often enough. It's not something you can simply understand. You can't just know it. Oh, I know. This is very simple. And then you move on. No, you have to actually do it. Model yourself. Memorize a speech or a talk or a lecture they gave. Put yourself in that position and try it out. You will surprise yourself. I can only give you these suggestions. I can model my advice, but you have to practice. It's up to you, all of you, to practice and hopefully to improve. Now, we talked about finding a model and identifying the hallmarks of a good public speaker. Some of the answers that were given last week. Public speakers appear confident. They know what they are talking about. They rehearse, they practice. They have a good sense of humor. They respond quickly and appropriately to questions. These are some of the hallmarks that we discussed last week. So there are general things and there are specific things. So it is up to all of you to think about what is good public speaking and what are the hallmarks of a good public speaker as they apply to your situation. Okay, I want to clarify something. Oftentimes I hear students say things like, my English is not good, right? 我的英文不好. People say this often to me. And they ask me, 我的英文要怎么样才能够变好? I hear this kind of question very often in my career. And the problem is, that's the wrong question. That is not the correct question to ask. 我的英文要怎么变好? 这样子问没有用. You have to ask yourself, where do you want to improve? What do you need to use English for? 语言能力不是单一能力. Okay? Language skills are not one thing. They are a collection of tools, many tools, and they apply to different situations. Okay? Language skills are a living thing. And it's the same for public speaking skills. You can't ask, I'm a terrible public speaker. Where do I improve? How do I improve? That's not the best question. The best question is, what do you need public speaking for? Remember this, because it will change. When you are a student, you will give public speaking in presentation form to classmates. You will need to explain your ideas in group discussions, right? But when you move on in your career, your needs will change. If your needs change, you need to practice new skills. Okay, this is something new that I wanted to add. Because we have this idea, 英文能力练起来之后就可以了，对不对? They're set in stone. That's a general idea. There are general things you can do, but there are specifics that you need to polish and tailor as time goes on and as you progress. And so I have to constantly think about what am I doing as a public speaker, and you need to adapt to the situations. And I think there's one more. We talked about what makes a speech or presentation good. And the question here is, what speech are you giving? What presentation are you giving? It sounds like very general advice, but not enough students do this. You don't think about the why of the presentation first, or the purpose, as we'll talk about. It's not considered often enough. What does my presentation look like at the end? You have to work backwards, you see. You can't start with preparing all the skills and then expecting the outcome to be good. You have to think of what the outcome is and then reverse engineer. What skills do I need to bring to the table to accomplish this presentation? Okay, that's something very important. The mindset has to change. The frame of mind needs to be different in order for this to work. This is my experience, at least. Okay, there are a couple more things, I think. Over the course of the next few weeks, we will be asking these questions. What is the process? Very important, it's a process of creating a presentation. It's not an action, a single action, right? Giving a presentation, creating it, rehearsing, editing, to the point of delivery, and then debriefing, is a process. What is this process? What is the best course of action? What is the best strategy? We'll think about this, okay? We'll also talk about rehearsing, practicing on the ground. So after the slides have been written, after you've set the goals, what are the best ways to rehearse for your presentation? We'll talk about visual aids. Okay, so there are different kinds of visual aids. Today we're using slides, right? Different programs you can use. I will give some suggestions. I will give some tips on using these programs. Some tips that go beyond, maybe, hopefully, things that you already know. And finally, giving and receiving feedback. Yes, how do you deal with feedback? How do you respond to tough questions? Sometimes hostile responses. How do you deal with it? And it takes some practice and it takes some confidence. Today we'll start with the first question. What is the process of creating a presentation? Anyone want to answer? What is the process? Where does it start? Where does it start? Where does a presentation begin? What is the opening point? When does it start? Anyone? 这个过程是从什么时候开始 ？Okay, that's fine. Yeah, you're still here. Yes, that's okay. Go ahead. What is the first thing that happens? What is the beginning? It's a very easy answer. No. When does it start? When does it start? The presentation process. The process of creating the presentation. Not giving it, not making it, but creating it. You have to create it first before you can give it. Where does it start? Where is the beginning? Yes, miss. It starts with the topic. Indeed, yes, it starts with the topic. And where do topics come from? That's a better answer, yes. But let's backtrack. Where does it start? Yes, miss.
Idea.
It starts with an idea. So presentations start with an idea, which is correct, I think. Whose idea? Yours or someone else's? Yes, John.
Something that touch audience.
It starts with an idea that touches your audience. Okay, those are all good answers, but it's more basic than that. A presentation starts first when you are asked. It starts first when you are given this chance to present. Let me give a couple of examples. For instance, in class, when you have to give a group presentation, the process starts when you are given the assignment. when the teacher assigns the presentation. That is the starting point. The creation process starts from being given the task, when you have to do it, when you know of this task. In my case, I'm giving a presentation now, right? My process starts when someone asks me, 吴老师，可不可以来做一个这样子的讲座? This is where it starts. Okay? This is where it starts. Now, that's important. It doesn't? Where does it start? This. Do you disagree? No? Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. It starts when you are given the opportunity. The communication process starts here. So what are the first questions you need to ask? When you're given a presentation, what are the details? You're given a presentation to present. What do you need to think about? What are the first principles? There are 4. Okay.
Time limits.
Very good. You have to ask first, how long will it be? Right? Where, when, those details aside. How long is the presentation? Right? How long does it have to be? For me, in this case, it's 90 minutes 5 times. That's the first thing you have to know. If it's 18 weeks, okay, 18 times 2 hours each, that's a different course. If it's 30 minutes, 1 time, that's a different course. So you have to know this first. How long is the presentation? And we call this in English duration or length. Duration. What else? Yes?
Audience.
Very good. You have to consider your audience. Who will come to listen to the presentation? Speaking to students, classmates, different things. Speaking to your boss, your clients, completely different. Know your audience. Know your audience. Consider your, and this will continuously change. 听起来很简单，对不对？尝试嘛。But oftentimes we don't start with these details. Oftentimes we start with, so what do I have to say? Right? You normally start with my messaging first. What is the message? What do I want to tell people? But that's not the place to start. You start with who is coming and for how long do I hold their attention? How much time do I have? That's where you start. Okay? There are some other things, okay? But these 2 are very good. Audience, duration. Okay? There are 2 others, okay? And we'll talk about those as we go along. So, if I can offer you one principle, just one, if you forget everything else that I've talked about today, remember this. Creating a presentation is writing. That's it. It is writing. It's a special form of writing. You cannot be a good presenter if you're not a good writer. Okay? You have to write. Creating a presentation is writing. Period. Full stop. Remember this. So I'll repeat it again, because that's what good public speakers do. Creating a presentation and then making it, delivering it, giving it, the process is writing. You have to think about it as a writing process. You can't think about it as, an organic thing, something that is, intuitive. Okay? Creating a presentation is not conversation. It's not English conversation. It is essentially writing. Practice public speaking. Practice giving presentations as you would practice writing. Work on presentation as you would work on your writing. And English writing, well, any kind of writing, but English writing is difficult. And so when you think about a presentation, you have to think about it like you would a piece of writing. Agreed? Yes? Agreed? There are many similarities between a piece of writing and a presentation. Let's come up with three. Three similarities between a piece of writing and a presentation. Anyone? How is presenting like writing?
It needs to be fluent.
It needs to be fluent. We don't describe writing as fluent, but I see what you mean. It needs to be, another word?
Logical.
Logical, very good. It needs to be presented in a way that your audience understands, okay? It needs to be, the official word we use is coherent. It needs to be coherent. Good. So, similar. What else? That's one. What else? Anyone? Yes, yes.
Clear structure.
I'm sorry?
Clear structure.
Very good. It should be structured. We talked about this also last week, that it should be structured. And that is a good answer, yes. But something more about the features, not just the features of the text, but the feature of the act of writing, and the act of presenting a text, and presentation of oral delivery. Similarities. Yes, Miss.
You write it and people will see it and present it and audience will listen.
Very good. You have to hold a silent audience. That is one of the key features that we often overlook. When you are writing, you can't see your reader, right? It's a divorced time and space. You need to hold the attention in a way so that it just makes sense. You have to hold your audience in a way that is not two-way often. I need to deliver so that you all listen, right? It's not always two-way. I can offer it to be two ways. That's something different in terms of comparing the two. But very often, it's a one-way street, and you hold your audience or your reader in a single line of communication. Okay, it's very often the case. Good. There are some others, but let's continue. So, creating a presentation is writing. Therefore, what is the writing process? What is the process of writing in English? How many of you have written essays in English? More than 4 paragraphs. Very good. Any others? 4 paragraphs in English. If you've never written 4 paragraphs or more in English, then presenting in English will be more difficult, you see. Understanding the process of writing, particularly in English, is important to knowing how this process goes. In easy terms, I don't want to complicate. In easy terms, you have to do this. So that is, if you have never done it, this is my suggestion. Practice writing 4 paragraphs in English. Practice your English writing. And then you will understand some things. What are some features of English writing, English presentations writing, that are different from Chinese writing?
Chinese writing is usually like it emphasizes on beautiful words, but English writing is more like fact and more direct.
In general, I think that's. Is that true? I think that is true in certain sense. Yes, I agree. In Chinese, there is an emphasis on style. Yeah, there is a stylistic approach in Chinese writing. Excuse me, very often. But in English writing, especially technical English writing, it doesn't play with words. It's very direct. English is very direct. in this sense, yes. Anything else? Any other differences between Chinese and English writing? 有没有修过英文作文课？修过作文课的学生，英文作文课 ，OK， 英文作文，大一、大二进阶基本都可以，没有 ，OK，then we have a problem。国文作文有没有写过？有没有？通常哈，在我不晓得在大陆怎么样哈，在台湾哈，通常教作文的方式是什么？通常老师怎么教作文？就不教啊，有没有？题目啊，写啊，给分数，几分不知道，迟早要漂亮一点。听过这样的说法吗？有没有 ？It doesn't matter， 要有创意，有讲跟没讲一样。对，要让人看得懂，有讲跟没讲一样嘛，对不对 ？OK， 好了。Let me digress for a moment。我讲一点题外话，跟题目有关有一点题外话。在台湾的升学考试，英文作文分数占多少？你的入学成绩的英文成绩，作文占多少？几分？20分。20分是多少？几分之几？1/5嘛，对不对？你们学校有没有花1/5的时间在练习英文作文？有的举手 ，Not me， 有没有 ？No, right? So that is a problem. We don't understand English writing, so we need to return to the basics. 好 ，English writing is defined by a few features. Okay, 英文作文课 ，Step 1. It's the same for presentations, but it's the same thing. But it's similar. 5 features of English writing that apply to your presentations. Okay? Number 1, give the conclusion first. Okay? That's very common in English. Structure it so that you give the conclusion first. We call this a thesis statement. If it's a paragraph, we call it a topic sentence. Give your conclusion first. In Chinese writing, we don't do this very often. In Chinese, it's normally 洋洋洒洒的，就是从前面一直写到最后，得到结论。In English, it's a different way. In English, we put the most important information at the beginning. You can develop ideas, 可以去验证，可以给一些细节等等，可以换主题，那都没有关系。But you give the most important information up front. Okay? That is the first very important feature. The second feature is similar to Chinese writing. You start with an introduction, very easy, right? You introduce your topic. You have a body, and then conclusion. Very easy. Okay. Second feature, similar in Chinese as well. We say 起承转合, right? You start, but you need to conclude. There are things in between. There's some flexibility. A third feature of English writing, and this is important in your presentations as well, is that you have to very clearly follow a logical order. Okay, it's very logical. In English, we have what we call rhetorical modes. Rhetorical modes, which apply to academic writing. The mode, 模式 a certain kind of format. 你可以想象它是一种公式 ，OK？ 这种公式有各式各样的 compare and contrast, classification, definition, etc. Argumentation, persuasion, different kinds. So think about your topic and then reach your conclusion. Those are 3 big features. The other 2 we'll talk about later or next week. We'll see. So, now that we know this, we should ask 4 things to return to what we said. When you receive your assignment, what you need to do is to ask yourself, what is the purpose of my writing task or my presentation? Purpose. And there are different kinds of purpose. but I think we should take a break. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, 5 minutes. Think about it. Purpose